Hello and welcome to another lab day. Thank you so much for being my partner. Let's do some chemistry together. All right, so just a couple logistic things. If you are watching this video as part of my pre-AP Chem A class, there's two things you need to do before you continue with this video. One, you definitely need your lab sheet because that's where you're going to record your data. So the video lab Precipitates lab, make sure that you go find that. The other thing is that if you have not yet watched the ionic equations video, you need to go back and watch that because not only do you need to do ionic equations for today's lab, but also it sets up the lab, gives some backstory, some context of why we might do this experiment. All right, let's get into it. So the focus today is this identifying an unknown. So that's the whole purpose of the lab. So our lab essential question is, what is the identity of the unknown? We'd had that backstory where imagine there was a spill. We're trying to identify the spill. And the procedure we're going to use is super common in the scientific method kind of world, where we're going to test a bunch of things we know, and then we're going to test the unknown with them and match the data. So the unknown data is going to match one of them from the above, and we're going to be able to identify the unknown. So let me show you my setup here. So the general setup is we've got these different dropper bottles, and then I've got these well plates. So the well plates are little flat trays that have little circles on them so I can mix a few drops of things together. We've got our 6 known solutions and our unknown. All right, so we're going to go in order using the data table to tell us what things to mix together, and then we'll fill in data such as S for soluble, or if we see a precipitate, we'll say I for insoluble, and then 2 or 3 words to kind of describe what we see. So that's what you're putting in your actual data table. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so we're going to go in order according to that data table. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my copper 2 nitrate, and I'm just going to kind of set that across the top of my wells. And if I count, it looks like I'm going to use the copper 2 nitrate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So I'm just going to go across and do a few drops, maybe 1, 2 drops. Just the size of my wells are pretty small. So 2 drops in 5 different wells. That'll just kind of save me some time later instead of having to get my bottle every time. Okay, so you're seeing what we're doing there. So I've got my different, my drops of the copper 2 nitrate. The first thing I'm going to mix it with is K2CrO4, so potassium chromate, and I'm just going to, again, put a couple drops in there. So see what we notice there. All right, so right away we can already see something happening. So there I've got, you can see that it's cloudy. It's kind of a mustardy color. We're going to check it in a little bit. The other thing that I have is, see how I have the word test written on this piece of paper? That's also going to help me tell if something has a precipitate or not. I can't see through that blob there, the T underneath it for test, so I know that there is definitely a precipitate. All right, so that's our first one. Now we're going to do lead 2 nitrate mixed with the copper 2 nitrate. All right, you can maybe already predict what you're going to see here. I'm mixing a nitrate with a nitrate. Remember what we know about all nitrates? Yep, all nitrates are soluble. So not surprising, those two, the lead 2 nitrate and the copper 2 nitrate, S for soluble. I can clearly see through it when I move it over my T. And so we're going to say for sure that's S for soluble. You don't have to write anything else, just S for soluble. Now I'm doing strontium nitrate. Oh man, once again, I'm mixing a nitrate with a nitrate. So probably I'm not going to see a precipitate. Yep, all nitrates are soluble. So again, not surprising. When I move this, I can clearly still see through it. Take a look at this. Notice that that color is more like a reddish brown now instead of just yellow. So as those particles and that chemical reaction finished, that precipitate changes color a little bit too. So one of the things you might talk about in your reasoning for this lab are things like insoluble things, precipitates, chemical change. That kind of stuff might be kind of interesting. All right, now let's do sodium sulfide. So sodium sulfide mixed with copper 2 nitrate. So I'm in the 4th one over. Yep. I'm going to put a couple drops in there. All right. Now this one, I hope you can tell from where you are. So when I look at this one and I look through the S, I definitely see some sort of like light blue-green fog kind of floating, especially if I compare it to this one, which is super clear. This one's super clear. This one's not as obvious as that, but there's definitely something floating around in there. So yeah, I would say maybe insoluble and then yeah, like light green foggy or something like that. So that's my sodium sulfide. Now we're going to end with our nickel chloride and copper 2 nitrate. So I put a couple drops in there. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything happening. It's kind of leaking over, but that's okay. I don't need that part anyway. So yeah, I would say that from these two, with the two precipitates we got were with K2CrO4 and Na2S. All right, now I'm going to go to my next row down and I'm going to do nickel chloride. So I'm going to put nickel chloride 1, 2, 3, 4 across. All right, so just a couple drops in there, couple drops of each. Okay, so I've got my, a little more. Okay, so there's my nickel chloride, and the first one I'm going to mix it with is K2CrO4. All right, so put that in there. All right, when I look at that, let me just make sure, slide it over here. Yeah, if I slide it over the T, I can still clearly see through that. So I'm going to say that that one, the nickel chloride and potassium chromate, that is soluble. Now I'm going to do lead 2 nitrate and the nickel chloride. Those. Yeah. Once again, if I slide it over my T, I can clearly see through it. So nickel chloride and PbNO3 2, that is also going to be soluble. Now let's do strontium nitrate. So nickel chloride and strontium nitrate. Mix a couple of those together. Yep, I'd say it's probably the same thing. So when I look at it, I don't see anything that wasn't already there. So it looks like it is still soluble. It is still a physical change. Yeah, I'm mixing two solutions together, but I'm not creating anything new. And then my last one is the sodium sulfide with the nickel chloride. All right, so sodium sulfide, oops, sodium sulfide with the nickel chloride. I'm being really careful of grabbing the right bottles here. Couple drops of that. All right, so sodium sulfide and nickel chloride. Okay, so this one is kind of like the one above it. If you can kind of tell, when I look through that, I can definitely see something cloudy in there. Again, not as obvious as that one. And in fact, this one has gotten more obvious with time. But I'm going to say that there's a little bit of like white cloudy, white fogginess in that sodium sulfide and nickel 2 chloride. So there's definitely something there that we could call that a precipitate. All right, let's go to our next row. So now we're doing Na2S. So my sodium sulfide, couple drops, and it looks like I need 3 total tests for that one because I've already done Na2S with other things, so that's why there's only 3 times I got to do it this one. So K2CrO4 is my first test. All right, yep, when I look at that, it's looking pretty clear. I can see through it in that test word, so we're going to call that soluble. Now I'm doing the PbNO3, so lead 2 nitrate and sodium sulfide. Couple drops. There we go. Okay, so there's a very obvious precipitate. Let me slide that over there. So hopefully you're seeing that one. So definitely like a marbly white film cloud, like for sure there is a precipitate there. So I for insoluble, and then for sure I can't see through it when I look at that little well. All right, so that was my, make sure I'm in the right spot, sodium sulfide and lead 2 nitrate. Now I'm doing strontium nitrate and strontium nitrate and sodium sulfide. See what we get there. All right. Nope, looking totally soluble. As I see through it, I can definitely still read that blue marker where it says T for test. So that is also, so strontium nitrate and sodium sulfide, that is soluble. All right, now I'm doing strontium nitrate as my test, and I just have to do 2 of those. 2 there, 2 there. All right, and then the first thing I'm going to mix it with is strontium nitrate and potassium chromate. See what happens when we mix that together. Yeah, nope, it's looking still totally soluble. If I slide it over, I can still see right through to that marker. So I'm going to say that that is definitely a soluble compound. And then the next one I'm testing it with is lead 2 nitrate. So lead 2 nitrate and strontium nitrate. See what we get there. Nope, that previous one was definitely precipitate, but I'm going to say this is definitely soluble. I can clearly see through it as I look at my test sheet, so that one is soluble also. I'm on my last test. I just need my lead 2 nitrate, a couple drops of that, with my potassium chromate. Potassium chromate. Let's see what happens when we mix those together. There we go. All right, sweet. There's another very clear precipitate. So if I move it over, I definitely cannot see through that blob. So that is a very bright yellow chalky precipitate. So I for insoluble first, and then you have some sort of description of it. All right, so that takes us through our known solutions. So now what I'm going to do is I got to test all of the unknowns. So I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to with my unknown. So here's my unknown, and I'm going to just put that across the bottom here, 6 wells. So a couple drops there. Now, obviously, we know that one of these is going to stay soluble because it is the identity of the unknown. Because remember, one of these 6 test solutions is the same identity of this. So really, you're mixing the same thing together, but we don't know which one it is. So we got to test all 6. So I've got my 6 unknowns across the, 6 samples of my unknown across the bottom, and I'm just going to go across the top. Let's do K2CrO4. Couple drops of that. All right, that looks totally soluble. So I can clearly see through. Yep, if I move that, I can clearly see through that. So that is soluble. Okay, the next one is PbNO3. So I'm in the unknown, that bottom row, PbNO3. Yep, still looking clear as I mix it with that. The next one is strontium nitrate. Couple drops of that. Yep, that's still looking soluble. All right. How about sodium sulfide? So I'm in that 4th one over now. Yep, still looks soluble as I mix it with that. Okay, so that tells me something. Now we're doing nickel chloride. So I'm in the 5th one over. Drop that in there. Yeah, totally soluble. I can see clearly right through it, nothing in the way at all. And the last one, copper 2 nitrate. Couple drops of that. Yeah, no precipitates at all. Again, as I move it over, I see it's totally clear. So when we mixed all 6 known solutions with the unknown solution, we definitely saw that all of them were soluble. That tells us something. So when you're trying to identify your unknown and you're using evidence, you're going to talk about that. You're going to talk about the fact that you got no precipitates with the unknown and then match that with some of the other ones that you saw. So this is the data that you're going to use to answer your lab EQ, to write your net ionic equations, and then eventually finish the lab report. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my computer so that it's facing the same direction as the data table so that you one more time can kind of see the results. Okay, so now you can hopefully kind of see the 2 different well plates and kind of see all the results all together. Now they match the order of your data table. Finish filling any data that you need to. Pause the video if you need to. Otherwise, thanks so much for being my partner today. Have a great day. Bye.